Pride never enters the heart like a storm. It slips in like a whisper, polite and flattering. It arrives dressed as confidence, wrapped in competence, disguised as dignity. You don't see it as a danger, you see it as a reward. After all, you work for this. The recognition, the success, the applause. You tell yourself it's only fair to feel proud, and for a time it is, until pride stops being gratitude and starts becoming identity. It begins with small victories, the promotion, the praise, the sense of being chosen. Success feels like sunlight, and pride like warmth. You stand taller, speak louder, believe deeper in your own brilliance. The compliments that once embarrassed you now feel like confirmation. The line between self-respect and self-worship starts to blur. The ancients warned that pride is not always loud. Sometimes it hides in silence, in the quiet assumption that you know better, deserve better, are better. It's not the roar of arrogance that destroys most souls. It's the subtle self-sufficiency that makes you forget where your strength came from. You begin to believe that you've outgrown advice, that those who question you simply don't understand your vision. You stop listening, not out of malice, but because the voice of others becomes background noise to your own certainty. Wisdom becomes optional when success feels inevitable. Pride turns gratitude into entitlement. What used to feel like a gift now feels like a right. You stop thanking and start claiming. You start seeing blessings as validation instead of grace. You forget that what was given can also be taken. The dangerous thing about pride is how rational it feels. You can explain it, justify it, baptize it in noble words. You tell yourself you're confident, not arrogant, independent, not stubborn, driven, not self-absorbed. Pride never calls itself pride. It always finds prettier names. But slowly, the mirror begins to change. You start caring less about truth and more about perception. You speak less from conviction and more from vanity. The approval of others becomes oxygen, and you start performing for applause rather than purpose. The people who once inspired you now feel like competition. You measure success by comparison, not calling. You forget that humility isn't weakness. It's the wisdom to remember that every peak stands on a mountain you didn't build alone. Pride blinds gently. It doesn't close your eyes all at once. It just narrows your vision. You stop seeing need, pain, or limits. You see only your reflection in the world around you. The higher you climb, the smaller others appear. And so, the fall doesn't start with failure. It starts with forgetting how fragile the heart becomes when it believes it can stand without grace. Forgetting that success without humility is a staircase with no railing. The wise once said that pride always precedes the fall, not because punishment waits above, but because blindness walks ahead. You don't trip because someone pushes. Pride builds mirrors everywhere. You look into your work, your achievements, your influence, and you see only the version of yourself you want to believe in. The reflection flatters you, edits you, praises you. It hides every flaw, every insecurity, every dependence. But mirrors tell comforting lies, and the more you stare into them, the more truth fades away. You begin to confuse the reflection with reality. You start protecting an image rather than nurturing a soul. You become the curator of your own myth, editing out humility, cropping out weakness, applying filters to humanity. The world claps for the version of you that doesn't exist, and you start to love that version more than yourself. The greatest danger of pride is isolation. Not physical, but emotional. The more self-assured you become, the fewer people you trust. No one seems qualified to correct you anymore. Advice feels like intrusion. Accountability feels like insult. Slowly, you surround yourself with echoes of your own opinion. The mirror becomes a prison. It locks you inside your own reputation. You start fearing mistakes, not because they're wrong, but because they'll crack the illusion. You stop risking, stop learning, stop growing, because perfection has become your God, and image its idol. Even faith bends beneath pride. You start praying less, not out of rebellion, but because you feel less need. You stop depending on grace and start counting on talent. You speak of blessings as if they were achievements, and the silence that follows feels like confidence when it's really distance. Pride doesn't shout, "I am God." It whispers, "I don't need God." That's why it's so lethal, because it sounds reasonable. It promises freedom, but delivers isolation. You get what you wanted, control, admiration, autonomy, but you lose what you needed, peace, intimacy, connection. Success becomes a performance you can't stop acting in. You smile while your heart grows heavier. You preach humility while quietly competing. You build kingdoms on sand and decorate them with gold. Everyone applauds, and yet you feel hollow. Deep down you sense the truth, that pride isn't strength, it's fear wearing armor, fear of being small, fear of being wrong, fear of being unseen. The confident tone hides a trembling hand, the calm face hides exhaustion. Every mirror eventually cracks, reality always returns. Maybe it's a failure, a betrayal, a humbling mistake, something that reminds you that you're not invincible. When it comes, it hurts more than anything else, not because it breaks you, but falls don't always make noise. Sometimes they happen in silence, a slow descent inside the soul. You still smile, still lead, still succeed, but something inside begins to crumble. Joy fades first, then gratitude, then peace. You can't point to a single moment when it happened, only to the emptiness that followed. Pride makes you heavy. It fills your heart with yourself until there's no room left for love. You become hard to move, hard to teach, hard to heal. The soul stiffens under the weight of its own importance. You start living off memory, remembering the days when your victories felt pure, when your motives were clean, when you did things for meaning instead of applause. But now everything feels like performance. You're chasing echoes instead of truth. Pride steals perspective. You no longer see how far you've drifted. You only notice how others seem smaller. You forget that altitude without humility doesn't bring you closer to heaven. It just makes the fall longer. People around you start to change. They stop being honest. They tell you what you want to hear. You think it's respect, but it's fear. Pride demands admiration and punishes authenticity. So the honest grow silent, and the flattering grow louder. The silence that follows success becomes suffocating. You can have everything and still feel unseen, because no one can truly see you while you're hiding behind your pride. You begin to sense the weight, invisible but unbearable. Every victory feels emptier than the last. Every accomplishment feeds a hunger it can't satisfy. You thought success would fill the void, but it only made the void grow. Pride doesn't fall in a day. It erodes slowly like stone under wind. You lose yourself one compromise at a time. A lie here, a dismissal there, until the version of you that once prayed for success no longer recognizes the person success created. The fall comes not as punishment, but as mercy. Because pride can't coexist with peace forever. Eventually, one has to give way. When pride breaks, the pain feels unbearable. But what's actually breaking is the illusion that you were ever in control. The crash isn't the tragedy. The denial is. The longer you pretend you're still on top, the harder it becomes to rebuild. The wise accept their falls quickly. The proud delay them until all that's left to lose is themselves. When you finally hit the ground, it won't be. When pride finally collapses, silence returns, not as shame but as healing. You breathe again. The world feels wider, the air lighter. For the first time in years, you stop defending yourself. You no longer need to be right. You just need to be real. Humility doesn't humiliate, it liberates. It strips away the costumes pride forced you to wear. You stand bare again, flawed, human, forgiven. You discover that weakness isn't your enemy, it's your reminder of dependence. The same dependence pride called failure now becomes freedom. You begin to rebuild differently. No longer chasing validation, you chase authenticity. You stop performing for applause and start working for purpose. You speak with less certainty, but more sincerity. You listen not to reply, but to understand. Gratitude returns like a long-lost friend. You thank not just for victories, but for lessons, not just for doors opened, but for walls that stopped you. You realize that not every setback was an attack. Some were interventions from grace. Humility teaches you how to receive correction without resentment. You learn that feedback is not insult, but invitation. That listening is not weakness, but wisdom. That service is not lesser than leadership, it's the foundation of it. You start to see others differently, not as competitors, but as companions. The success of others stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like celebration. Pride compared, humility connects. The wise know that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. You stop living at the center of your world and start orbiting something higher: truth, purpose, love. The peace you once faked now becomes real. It's quieter, less flashy, but far more durable. It doesn't depend on praise or power. It lives in the space where ego used to shout. You realize that humility doesn't erase strength, it refines it. The strongest are not those who never fall, but those who rise without arrogance. Those who build without boasting. Those who lead without losing kindness. Humility restores balance. You can finally look in the mirror and see both strength and dependence, victory and vulnerability. You don't hate the reflection anymore. From the outside, humility looks like loss. From the inside, it feels like resurrection. The pieces that shattered are not wasted, they're rearranged. The person who rises after pride's fall is not smaller. They're wiser, lighter, freer. The weight that once crushed you becomes your testimony. You stop fearing weakness because you've tasted the mercy that lives beneath it. You stop needing perfection because you've learned that brokenness makes room for grace. The proud chase invincibility, the humble find invulnerability, not because nothing can hurt them, but because nothing can own them. Pride demanded to be admired. Humility is content just to exist. You start living without masks. You no longer hide your mistakes. You share them as maps. You stop pretending to be the hero and start becoming the guide, someone who points others toward what you once forgot. The wise don't hate their past pride. They learn from it. They understand that without the mountain of ego, they would never have discovered the valley of grace. Pride built your stage, but humility taught you the song. You start teaching others what you learned through pain, that success without soul is failure in disguise, that applause fades, but peace endures, that pride builds towers and humility builds homes. The world still tempts you to return to pride's comfort, to reclaim control, to chase validation, to prove yourself again. But this time, you see the trap. You've learned that true power doesn't shout, it kneels. Every day becomes a quiet practice of remembrance. You remind yourself where you came from, who helped you rise, who forgave you when you fell. Gratitude becomes armor, protecting you from the poison of ego. You learn to celebrate quietly, to serve without spotlight, to lead with empathy. Your success no longer isolates, it inspires, because you're no longer climbing to prove worth, you're walking to share wisdom. Pride once made you heavy, humility makes you weightless. You can finally breathe without pretending. You live unguarded, unashamed, unafraid of smallness. Because you've discovered that greatness was never about being above, it was about being enough. The wise know this truth. Every crown eventually bends, every mountain eventually erodes. But character shaped by humility, outlasts them all. Pride built kingdoms that history forgot. Humility builds legacies that eternity remembers. So when the world applauds your strength, smile softly and look upward, because you now know what pride never understood, that the highest you'll ever stand is when you re on your knees.